You are standing in your basement right now, or your garage, or that little closet by the laundry, staring at the same steel tank you have ignored for years. It hums, it leaks a little heat, and it is quietly counting down to the day it rusts through and floods your floor. But it does not have to. There is a jug of clear liquid that costs about $3 at any grocery store, and used the right way, it can push that tank past 20 and even 30 years of service. Most homeowners will replace 3 or 4 water heaters in the time one careful man replaces none. And the reason you never heard this is simple. Nobody makes money when your tank refuses to die. Here is the claim, stated plainly, so you know exactly what you are staying for. A modern water heater is engineered to survive its warranty and then quit, usually somewhere between 8 and 12 years. The thing that decides whether yours dies young or lasts 3 decades is not the brand, not the price, not the fancy digital display. It is one soft metal rod inside the tank and one cheap liquid you already know. I learned this the hard way, and then I learned it again from people who have been keeping iron and steel alive without hardware stores for over 200 years. Let me tell you a little about who is talking to you, so you know I am not some kid reading a script. I am a man in my late 50s. I spent most of my working life doing everything the conventional way, the way the salesman and the installer told me, writing the checks, trusting that if something important existed, somebody whose job it was would have mentioned it. I owned 4 different houses over 30-some years, and I replaced water heater after water heater, dragging the old rusted tanks out to the curb, never once asking why they kept dying on almost the same schedule. I was skeptical when I first heard what I am about to tell you. I figured if it were true, everyone would already know. That skepticism is exactly why I trust it now, because I did not take it on faith. I tested it, and it held up, and it made me a little angry at how much money I had handed over for nothing. The first time I drove out to Holmes County, Ohio, and sat at a kitchen table with an Amish family near Millersburg, I spent the whole afternoon looking for the things I expected to see and not finding them. No breaker panel humming, no stack of appliance warranties in a drawer. What they had instead was a way of thinking about metal and water that the rest of us forgot on purpose. By the end of this, you will understand a document read to the Royal Society of London on the 22nd of January, 1824, that explains the whole trick, and I will show you the exact weekend job any homeowner can do, even in a house built in 1962, with no permit, no contractor, and no special skill. So let me tell you what actually kills your water heater, because it is almost never what you think. Everybody assumes a water heater dies because the heating element burns out or the thermostat fails. Those parts do fail, and they are cheap, and any handy person can swap them in an afternoon. That is not what ends the tank. What ends the tank is a slow rot you cannot see, happening on the inside of the steel, in the dark, in the hot water, every single day. Steel and water and heat want to become rust. That is just chemistry. Your tank is a steel drum full of hot water, which is about the most corrosive combination a homeowner owns. Left alone, it would rust through in a couple of years. So the engineers did something clever, and they did not tell you about it. Inside your tank, screwed into the top, there is a long metal rod called a sacrificial anode. Read that word again, sacrificial. It is there to die, so your tank does not. It is made of magnesium or aluminum wrapped around a thin steel wire, and it works on a principle of basic science. When 2 different metals sit together in water, one of them corrodes first and protects the other. Magnesium and aluminum are hungrier for corrosion than steel, so the rod willingly rots away, giving itself up one flake at a time, while your tank stays clean and whole. As long as that rod has meat left on it, your tank essentially cannot rust. The corrosion attacks the rod instead of the walls. Now here is the part that should make you sit up. That rod has a lifespan. In average water, it is mostly eaten away in about 3 to 5 years. In hard water, or if you have a water softener, it can be gone in 2. And once the rod is consumed down to that bare steel wire, the corrosion has nothing left to chew on except your tank. From that day forward, every hour of hot water is quietly eating the steel walls. The tank looks fine on the outside, it works fine. And it is dying from the inside on a clock, and you have no idea, because in 20 years, no plumber, no manufacturer, And no salesman ever once told you those rods existed or that they were supposed to be checked and replaced. Think about what that means. The single part that decides whether your tank lasts 8 years or 30 is a $10 rod that most people never look at even one time in the entire life of the heater. It is not hidden by accident. Let me put a picture to it, because I want you to really see what is happening inside that steel drum in your basement. Imagine a boxer stepping into the ring to take punches for you. Every day, the water in your tank throws its punches, the slow chemical blows that would otherwise land on the steel walls. The anode rod steps in front of every one of them. It absorbs the corrosion, it takes the beating, and it slowly wastes away doing it. For the first few years, that boxer is fresh and strong, and there is plenty of him to spare. But nobody is in your corner counting the rounds. Nobody swaps in a fresh fighter. So one day the boxer is gone, worn down to a thin wire skeleton, and the punches keep coming, except now there is nothing between them and the walls of your tank. That is the exact moment your water heater's real death begins, and it happens in total silence, years before the first drip ever shows up on your floor. The tank you think is fine at year 8 may already be 3 years into that beating. Out in Ohio, one of the older men pulled an anode rod out of a tank for me to show me what a spent one looks like. It came out looking like a chewed pencil, thin and pitted and crusted, more wire than metal. He was not surprised by it at all. To him, checking that rod was as ordinary as checking the oil in an engine. That was the thing that struck me. In that world, you do not throw away a tool because a wear part wore out. You replace the wear part. We were trained to do the opposite, to treat the whole appliance as the wear part, and to throw the entire thing away when the cheapest piece inside it quietly finished its job. This is not fringe theory or backyard superstition. It is 200-year-old established science, and it has a birthday. On the 22nd of January, 1824, a chemist named Sir Humphrey Davy stood before the Royal Society of London and presented a paper on how to stop the copper hulls of British Navy ships from corroding away in seawater. The Royal Navy was losing fortunes as salt water ate the copper sheeting off the bottom of its warships. Davy proved that if you bolted small pieces of a more reactive metal, like iron or zinc, onto that copper, the reactive metal would corrode and the copper would be spared. He called them protectors. We call it cathodic protection, and the sacrificial anode in your water heater is the direct grandchild of Davy's warship experiments. His assistant, a young man named Michael Faraday, would later give us the very words anode and cathode in 1834. So the science that could make your tank last 30 years is not new. It is older than the light bulb, older than the telephone, older than your grandfather's grandfather. It has been sitting in plain sight, printed in the records of the Royal Society for 2 centuries. And somehow, in your own house, on your own tank, nobody thought it was worth mentioning. That is not an accident of memory. That is a business model, and I will show you exactly who profits from it. But first you need to understand the second half of the problem, because the rod is only one of the 2 things trying to kill your tank, and the other one is where that $3 liquid comes in. If corrosion attacks from the metal, the second enemy attacks from the water itself, and it is piling up on the bottom of your tank right now. Turn on your hot water and listen. If you ever hear popping, rumbling, or a sound like gravel rolling around inside the tank, that is not your imagination, and it is not harmless. That is sediment. Every gallon of water that enters your tank carries dissolved minerals, mostly calcium and magnesium, the same stuff that leaves white crust on your faucets and spots on your dishes. When that water gets heated, those minerals fall out of solution and settle to the bottom of the tank as a hard, chalky rock we call scale. Over the years, it builds into a layer, sometimes inches thick, sitting right on top of the burner or the lower heating element. And that layer does real, measurable damage. When researchers at the Battelle Memorial Institute ran controlled tests on storage water heaters, they found that for a gas tank, every 5 grains per gallon of water hardness caused about a 4% loss in efficiency. In genuinely hard water, that stacks up fast. Scale buildup can cut a water heater's efficiency by roughly 30%, which means for every $3 you burn to heat water, 1 of them is wasted cooking a rock at the bottom of your tank. Worse, that scale traps heat against the steel, creating hot spots that stress the metal and crack the protective glass lining inside, which opens brand new doors for corrosion. Hard water can cut the working life of a water heater nearly in half. And most people have never once cleaned the inside of their tank in the entire time they owned it. Think about how much of this country runs on hard water. Across most of the middle of the nation, from Texas up through the plains and into the Midwest, homeowners are pulling water loaded with 15, 20, even 25 grains per gallon of hardness out of the ground. At 20 grains per gallon, using that Battelle figure, you are talking about a 16% hit to efficiency before you even count the physical damage. And the way that scale attacks is sneaky, because on a gas heater, the rock sits on the very bottom, right over the flame, so the burner has to fire longer and hotter to push heat up through an inch of insulating mineral crust to reach the water above it. On an electric heater, the sediment buries the lower element and cooks it until it burns out early. Either way, you are paying more every single month to get less, and the tank is wearing out faster while it happens. That popping and rumbling sound is literally the sound of water flashing to steam underneath the scale, trapped, trying to escape. A tank that sounds like a coffee percolator is a tank that is telling you, out loud, that it is choking. I heard that sound in my own basement for years, and I thought it was normal. I thought that was just what a water heater did as it got older. Nobody ever told me it was a symptom, that it was fixable, that it was costing me money on every heating cycle. That is the pattern with all of this. The tank tries to warn you in its own language, and because nobody ever taught you the language, you tune it out until the day it floods. Now, here is where you get your hands on the fix, and it costs almost nothing. That $3 liquid I promised you is plain white vinegar. A single-gallon jug, the kind you can buy at any grocery store for about $3, is a mild acetic acid, and acetic acid dissolves calcium scale. This is the same chemistry your grandmother used to clean out a kettle. Restaurants use it on commercial machines. It is gentle enough to eat and strong enough to eat through years of mineral rock without harming your steel tank or its glass lining. Here is how you use it, and you can do this on a Saturday morning. First, shut off the power to an electric heater at the breaker, or turn a gas unit to the pilot setting and shut off the cold water supply. Let it cool for an hour or two, because you do not want to fight scalding water. Then connect a garden hose to the drain valve at the bottom, run it to a floor drain or outside, and drain the tank most of the way down. Now, using a funnel through the anode port on top or through the hot water outlet, pour in your gallon of white vinegar, close it up, let the cold water fill the tank back partway, and let that vinegar sit and soak for a few hours, or even overnight if the scale is bad. The acid works into the mineral crust and loosens it. Then you flush it all out through that bottom valve until the water runs clear. Do this once a year and you will never let scale get a foothold. You just did, for $3, what plumbers charge $200 to do, and what most homeowners never do at all. And that is exactly the kind of thing I found waiting for me at those Amish tables, room by room, tucked away like it was ordinary. Because what I have shown you so far, the sacrificial rod and the vinegar soak, is only the water heater. The same families keep a cellar cool through August with no compressor, keep a pantry stocked without a chest freezer, keep pests out of the grain without a single chemical, and heat a whole front room off a firebox the size of a bread box. I gathered the best of what they showed me, the methods for every room in the house, into a single plain collection I call the Complete Amish Home System, and there is a special limited time offer on it running right now, linked in the description below, with a QR code on your screen you can scan. I am not going to sell you on it, because the point of this video is that you deserve to have this knowledge back in your own hands. So let me get right back to the part they never wanted you to figure out on your own. Because now you have to ask the obvious question, if this is 200-year-old science and the fix costs $3, why in the world did nobody ever tell you? Let me be careful and fair here, because I am not a man who cries conspiracy at every shadow, but follow the money with me for a minute, because the numbers do not lie. A water heater is one of the few things in your house that, when it fails on somebody else's schedule and forces an emergency purchase at full price. When your tank floods the basement on a Sunday night, you are not shopping around for the best deal. You are calling whoever answers the phone and you are paying whatever they ask, $1,500, $2,000, sometimes more. Installed, now multiply that by every house in the country replacing that tank every 10 years instead of every 30. That is not a small difference. That is an entire industry built on the quiet assumption that your tank will die young and you will never know why. So ask yourself, whose interest is served by keeping the anode rod a secret? Not yours. The manufacturer sold you a tank designed to outlive its warranty by a couple of years and not much more. The rod that would let it last decades is the cheapest part in the whole unit, and it is the one part they are the quietest about. The installer who put your tank in had 30 seconds to mention that you should check the rod every few years. Did he? Mine never did. Not once. Across 4 different houses and more than 3 decades of paying those bills. I replaced water heaters I now know I could have saved, and every one of those replacements put money in somebody's pocket for a job that never needed doing. And think about the warranty itself, because it tells you everything if you read it the way an engineer reads it. When a manufacturer sells you a 6-year tank and a 12-year tank that are physically almost identical, the main difference between them is often the size and number of the anode rods inside. The 12-year tank has more sacrificial metal, so it lasts longer, and they know it and they price it accordingly. They have known for a century that the amount of sacrificial metal in that tank is the dial that sets its lifespan. They tuned that dial to expire on schedule. A warranty is not a promise that your tank will last. It is a calculation of how long it will last before they have to give you a new one, and they set the anode to match. That is not a rumor. That is written into the very way these products are built and sold. It goes deeper than silence. The whole design drifted toward the disposable. Older tanks from the middle of the last century were often built with thicker steel and anode rods you could actually get to and service. Somewhere along the way, tanks got cheaper to build and harder to maintain. On a lot of modern units, they foam the top so solid you would never guess there is a serviceable rod under there at all. Some manufacturers even hide a second anode, and I will come back to that because it is the heart of the secret I am saving for the end. The point is this. A product that lasts 30 years gets sold once a generation. A product that lasts 10 years gets sold 3 times as often. You do the math on which one an industry prefers, and then remember that you were never given the information to choose. That is the anger you should be feeling right now, and it is the right kind of anger because it points at a fix instead of a grievance. You were not failed by physics, you were failed by silence. And the good news buried in that anger is that the moment you know the secret, you are out of the trap for good, for the price of a rod and a jug of vinegar. Now, if you already own a house and you are sitting there thinking this only applies to people building something new or buying a fancy modern unit, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. I want to talk directly to the man whose house was built before 1980, whose water heater is already 10 or 12 years old, who figures it is too late and the damage is done. It is not too late, and here is why. Even a tank that is a decade old, if it has not yet rusted through, can often be brought back and stretched for many more years because the anode either still has some life or can be replaced entirely. And because that scale on the bottom can be dissolved out no matter how old it is, you do not need a permit to change a rod or flush a tank. You do not need a contractor. You do not need to touch a single thing that requires an inspection. This is maintenance on a part designed to be maintained in a tank you already own with tools you probably already have. And let me clear up one thing that trips people up because it is important and almost nobody explains it. If you have a water softener in your home, you might think you are protected. And in one way you are, because softened water builds far less scale on the bottom of the tank. But there is a catch that the softener salesman never mentions. Softened water is actually more aggressive toward a magnesium anode rod, so it eats that rod faster, which means the very thing protecting your tank from rust gets used up quicker in a softened house. So if you soften your water, you have to be even more diligent about checking that rod, not less. Many folks in that situation switch to a longer lasting aluminum or a zinc alloy rod, or they go to a powered anode that does not get consumed at all. The lesson is the same. Know what is in your tank, know what your water is doing to it, and keep the protection alive. Nobody hands you that knowledge, you have to take it. Here is exactly what to do this weekend on an existing tank. Find the anode. On most heaters, it is under a plastic cap or a hex head bolt right on top of the tank, usually a 1 1/16 inch head. Get a breaker bar or a long wrench, shut off the water and the power first, and break that rod loose. Pull it up and look at it. If it is still a fat rod, you are in good shape, drop it back in and just keep an eye on it. If it is chewed down to a thin wire, or if 6 inches of that bare steel core are showing, or if it is caked and crumbling, that rod has been doing its job and it is almost spent. Replace it with a new one for around $10 to $15, or step up to a magnesium rod for softer protection, and you have just reset the clock on your tank. Then do the vinegar flush I described, and you have hit both enemies in one morning. A tank you were told to throw away just became a tank that outlives your mortgage. And if you go to pull that rod and it will not budge, or your tank is packed into a closet with no room above it to lift a long rod out, do not give up, because that is exactly the situation the secret I am about to give you was made for. The Amish did not have wide open utility rooms and impact wrenches either. They had tight spaces, hard water, and a refusal to throw away good iron, and what they did about it is the single most useful thing I carried home from Ohio. So here it is. The thing almost nobody knows, the piece that ties 200 years of science to a 200-year-old way of living, the reveal that changes how you see that tank forever. Start with a fact that most homeowners, and honestly most handymen, have never heard. A great many water heaters do not have one anode rod. They have two. There is the obvious one under the cap on top, and then there is a second hidden anode built right into the hot water outlet, the pipe where the hot water leaves the tank. It is called a combination anode, and it is completely invisible from the outside. You can replace the top rod, feel proud of yourself, and still have a second rod down there that nobody ever mentioned. Here is how you find it, and this is the kind of trick that used to get passed hand to hand and never written in a manual. Shut everything down, disconnect the plumbing at the hot water outlet, and run a long screwdriver or a wooden dowel down inside that pipe. If it slides down freely, there is no hidden rod. But if it stops after just a couple of inches, you have found a second anode sitting there, quietly protecting or quietly used up in a spot you would never have thought to look. On a tank in a tight closet where you cannot lift a rod out the top, that hot water outlet is often the one place you can add or renew protection, because a flexible or segmented anode can go in where a straight one never could. Now, let me connect that to the older wisdom, because this is where it stops being a plumbing tip and becomes something deeper. Remember Davy and his warships. When he bolted that sacrificial metal onto the copper hulls, his notes recorded something curious. In the seawater, a soft, chalky, protective crust would form over the protected metal, a calcareous deposit, and that lime coating actually helped shield the surface. The old-timers understood the same thing in their bones without the chemistry. On the farm, a galvanized stock tank, the kind that watered the horses, is nothing but a steel tank coated in a sacrificial layer of zinc. The zinc corrodes first, and the steel lives. When a good farmer wanted that tank to last, he did not scrub it down to bare shiny metal. He let a gentle mineral film build and settle, he tossed in a chunk of sacrificial metal, and he never let the water go fully stagnant or fully acidic. Protect the metal with a more reactive metal, and let a thin natural coating do the rest. That is the whole secret, and it is exactly what a properly maintained water heater does if you let it. So here is the finished technique, the thing you can do this weekend that pulls all of it together. You are going to run your tank like an Amish farmer ran his stock tank and like the British Navy ran its hulls. 1. Check both anodes, the top one and the hidden one in the hot water outlet, and keep at least one healthy rod of sacrificial metal in that tank at all times, replacing it the moment it thins to the wire. That is Davy's protector doing in your basement exactly what it did on a warship in 1824. 2. Once a year, do the $3 vinegar soak to strip the hard scale off the bottom before it can trap heat and crack the lining. 3. And this is the piece the manuals leave out. Turn your thermostat down from the factory setting. Most tanks ship set around 140 degrees. Bring it down to about 120 to 125. It is still plenty hot for a shower. It is safer for the children and the older folks in the house. And here is the part that matters. Calcium falls out of water faster the hotter it gets. So a cooler tank forms scale far more slowly. You will build less rock, waste less fuel, and stress the steel less, all from turning one dial. And there is one more small habit that costs you nothing at all and doubles the payoff, a habit those farm families would recognize instantly because it is just good stewardship of water. Once a month, take 30 seconds, hook up the hose or hold a bucket under that bottom drain valve, and let out just a gallon or two of water while the tank is under pressure. That quick blast pulls the loose sediment off the bottom before it ever has a chance to harden into rock. 30 seconds a month. Between that monthly flick of the valve and the once-a-year vinegar soak, scale never gets a foothold in your tank, and your annual cleanout becomes a formality instead of a fight. This is the rhythm of maintenance the old people lived by. Small attention, often, so you never face the big failure. We were sold the opposite. Ignore it completely, then panic and replace it. One of those approaches keeps a tank alive for 30 years. The other one keeps an industry alive for 30 years. Now you know which is which. I want you to notice something about all of this, because it is the real lesson underneath the plumbing. Not one thing I have told you tonight is high technology, a more reactive metal to take the corrosion, a mild acid to dissolve the scale, a cooler temperature to slow the minerals, a regular little flush to keep the bottom clean. Every single piece of it was understood 200 years ago by a chemist in London and by farmers watering their horses out of galvanized tanks, and every single piece of it was quietly left out of the manual that came in the box with your water heater. The Amish did not invent this science. They just never stopped practicing it, because they were never in the business of selling you the next tank. That is it. A sacrificial rod, a jug of vinegar, and a thermostat turned down a notch. 3 things. None of them hard, none of them expensive, none of them requiring a single permit or a single phone call to a contractor. Do those 3 things and a water heater that the industry built to die at 10 can genuinely serve you past 20, past 25, and in soft enough water, past 30. It is not magic. It is Humphrey Davy's 200-year-old science and a farm family's 200-year-old habit finally put back in your hands where they should have been all along. Take a breath and feel what just happened, because it is bigger than a water heater. You were told something in your own home had to die on a schedule, and you believed it, and you paid for it over and over, because the one page of knowledge that would set you free was quietly left out of every manual you ever owned. Now you have it back. That is the whole game. Not a gadget, not a subscription, not a service call, just knowledge that was taken from ordinary people and can be taken right back by anyone willing to lift a wrench and pour a jug of vinegar. If you are the kind of person who believes real, practical knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect somebody else's profit, then you already know what to do next, and I want you to actually do it. Go down to your basement or your garage this week, pop that cap off the top of your tank, and look at your anode rod for the very first time. Then come back here and tell me in the comments what you found. Was it a fat, healthy rod, or was it chewed down to the bare wire? I read these, and I want to know how many of you discovered a tank that was dying and never knew it. Leave that comment. This audience does not speak up enough, and your one sentence might be the thing that saves a stranger's basement from a flood. And if this is the kind of thing you want more of, understand what you are really doing when you subscribe. You are not supporting a channel. You are joining a group of people quietly taking back the practical knowledge that got buried on purpose, one forgotten skill at a time. Next time, I am going to show you how those same families keep an entire root cellar at a steady, perfect temperature straight through the hottest week of August with no electricity, no compressor, and no monthly bill, using nothing but the ground and one design detail that building crews stopped, including in 1950. You are going to want to see where they put that one vent, because once you see it, you will never look at a basement wall the same way again. Check both anodes, pour the vinegar, flush the bottom, turn down the dial, and I will see you on the next one, neighbor.